conceived in rape, targeted for abortion, protected by law. Rebecca Kiessling shares her incredible story about the value of every life today. I'm Drenda, and this is Drenda on Guard. Let's get into it. We must stand up. There are answers. We declare a war on sadness, war on sadness, war on sadness, sadness, war on sadness. Self-made gods are nice things to have around until people actually start to need God. And that's what's happening in our culture. We need to do something. We need to say something. We need to stand up. Be bold and courageous. You've got to stay on guard. On June 24th, 2022, the Supreme Court of the United States officially overturned Roe v. Wade. It wasn't only a day of restoration for our nation, but also a day of victory for all the women of faith who fought to bring an end to abortion and the killing of babies. My guest today knows firsthand the horrors of this destructive mindset. If these people had their way, Rebecca Kiessling wouldn't be with us today. Rebecca, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you. And I just want you, first of all, just let everybody know your incredible story.
Well, just briefly, I was adopted and I learned 18 that I was conceived when my birth mother was raped. At 19, I met her and learned the horrible details. She had been abducted at knife point by a serial rapist.
Wow.
And she was really happy to meet me. But she told me that if abortion had been legal, she absolutely would have aborted me. She said, even if she had to do it all over again, she told me, you don't know what it was like. It should have been my right.
Wow.
It was, of course, very, very painful. And then 6 years later, she changed her mind about abortion. And decades later, we are both so thankful that we were both spared the horror of abortion.
Wow, that's quite a story. So even when you're 18 years old, she still regretted that she couldn't make that decision, but then later she had a change of heart. You know, I hear this all the time, Rebecca. When we're young, we're self-centered, right? We're selfish, and our culture pushes us, and really Satan, you know, the one that said, I will exalt myself above the throne of God, that attitude of it's all about me, I'll exalt myself, it's about what I want. It's a selfishness and a self-centeredness. That's how we are when we're younger. But I can tell you, I talk to women all the time that are more my age that say, I regret having an abortion. I regret I have no children. I regret that I raised my one daughter to be so self-centered. She's not married today and I have no grandchildren. I'm hearing those kinds of things from women more my age that love God or that have come to a realization that, just as my mother-in-law said yesterday, who's about to go home to be with the Lord, she said, family's all that matters at my age, all that matters. And I'm so thankful. I have many children because I wouldn't have anybody to visit me and I'd be all alone. So as we get older, we think about some of these things. And it sounds like your mom had a change of heart as well as she got older.
And actually, out of all three of her children, I'm the only one who has a relationship with her.
Wow.
So if it weren't for her having me, she would be all alone right now. She's 84 years old. She would be all alone.
Wow.
You know, interestingly, you know, you talk about, it's selfish. And of course, abortion is. It is. It's also fear-driven.
Mm-hmm.
But the past week, I have had just been inundated with pro-aborts, and I will call them pro-aborts, and I'll tell you why, coming to my Facebook page saying things like, you should have been aborted.
Wow.
Okay, hence they are pro-abortion.
Yes, they are. They're not pro-choice. That is a misnomer, isn't it? I mean, when they say they're pro-choice, no, they want you to abort that baby, and anybody that doesn't is evil in their sight. They're pushing. Yeah. Even one lady said, one woman, I said that, Lucy, she said, I would get pregnant just to kill the baby, just to abort the baby. I'm like, wow, you're a nice person.
Yeah, and then they say, this is why we need to have adult abortion. And they'll say, if you cared about your birth mother at all, you would have killed yourself a long time ago.
Wow.
They've
These are
said that.
hateful things.
Oh yeah, yeah. And they've said that, if you had been aborted, you wouldn't be here today and you wouldn't know the difference anyway. So what does it matter? And I explained how that would justify someone killing you today because you wouldn't be here tomorrow and you wouldn't know the difference anyway. So what does it matter? Like, they don't use logic to think
No,
this
no
through.
logic, no logic. I saw a Busy Phillips, you may have seen this, was in Washington, D.C., marching with the group of women that are angry about Roe v. Wade being overturned, which should have never been in position to begin with. But she was all saying, I did this for my children, I did this for my mother, I did this for my grandmother. I'm thinking, what, you did this for the mother that didn't abort you, the grandmother that didn't abort her, and you're doing it for your children that you didn't abort because you want them to abort your grandchildren? I mean, they don't even have any critical thinking skills. It's so ridiculous to even say such a stupid thing. I'm just going to call it what it is, okay? That's just an asinine thing to say. So then they have the audacity to tell you should have never been born.
And they'll say that I'm selfish. Okay, so what they'll say is, oh, notice how Rebecca, it's all just me, myself, and I, like the world wouldn't revolve if Rebecca weren't in it, and she's just so selfish, just me, telling her story. She needs to know it's not all about her, it's about her rape victim mother. But here's the thing is, I feel the most selfish thing any of us can do is to say, oh, well, at least I was born, or at least I was wanted, at least I was planned. And then just live your life and say, too bad for the rest.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Right.
That's selfish.
Right.
I feel like my life was spared from a burning building. And as I have the opportunity to go back and save others, I'm going to do it. And that is our calling as Christians, to rescue those who are being led away to death.
Right.
Hold back those who are staggering towards slaughter. And if you say we knew nothing of this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who guards your life know it? Will he not repay each person according to what he has done? We're
good.
not to be selfish. We're not to just live our life and just, pretend like none of this is happening and who cares.
I know the whole lack of logic in the way they're approaching this too, just like Busy Phillips saying that, she went on to say it's about equality. And I'm thinking, do you know that 5 times more black babies are aborted than white babies, and next is Hispanic? So they say it's an equality.
Globally, women are losing our voices.
Yes.
It's primarily females who are being aborted globally, which leads to more sex trafficking, more rape and abduction. I mean, to be pro-woman is to be pro-life. And it's also, women overwhelmingly say that they were coerced into aborting, that they didn't really feel like they had any other choice.
Absolutely, because as we were saying, people that call themselves pro-choice are not pro-choice, they are pro-abortion, and they are very in your face about abortion and pushing women to get abortion. If they were really truly pro-choice, they'd have no problem with a woman seeing an ultrasound, weighing the facts, hearing the facts, looking at and hearing different stories before they made a decision. But no, they're furious if anyone dare want to show that. Now, you're an attorney. You have been speaking for years at different events and helping people understand that not just the woman has any kind of rights, but so does this unborn child. I mean, you have rights. You're a woman of God, and you have rights as well. What about these babies' rights? And how does this all play into this? And why do they not see that they're killing women in the womb?
They say all these hateful things to me, and I tell them, look, I'm a woman. What good are my rights to anything as a woman if I don't have my right to life? And they can never answer that question because, your right to life is a prerequisite to be able to enjoy all other rights. Your other rights are useless. If I have a right to vote, it's useless if I'm dead.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. They're calling it reproductive health. I find that very interesting. They always, the left and obviously evil, always calls good evil and calls what they're doing that's evil as good. And we know that the scripture tells us that'll happen. But to call it reproductive health, it's actually human death, right? It's not reproductive health, it's human death. They're killing a human being in the name of reproductive health. They coin words like Planned Parenthood. No, they're not planning for anyone to be a parent. They're planning to take their parenthood away from them. But they know how to market these ideologies and these things that are completely from the pit of hell. I know we went to Rome years ago. We've been there several times, and these Romans they got so hedonistic. It was all about sex and just being able to do anything they wanted, and these sex houses, and just taking the babies and throwing them over the wall. And it was Christians that would rescue these babies if they were still alive and try to nurse them back to health, or at least give them a Christian burial. So you can go to the catacombs and see all of these tiny infant graves. This is nothing new. This is something that Satan has done. He hates human beings. He hates God's creation, that we're created in his likeness and his image. He hates mankind, womankind, all of us, all kinds of us, and wants to destroy us. And he's been doing that from the very beginning, all the way back to Baal worship and Moloch, when they'd offer their children up to be sacrificed, to be burned. It's
people all the time. There's, people ask, "Oh, is this it? Is it over?" I'm like, it'll never be over. There's nothing new under the sun. This is modern day child sacrifice.
It is,
and it's an abomination. In Revelation, like he was going after the pregnant woman. Satan, and that's the battleground right there. So this is nothing new, and just like in the days of Moses, where they're killing off the newborns, and the days when King Herod wanted all the newborn babies killed. I mean, this is just before biblical times. In the book of Amos, it says, "I will not." For the word of the Lord came to me, saying, "I will not revoke the punishment, for they have ripped up the pregnant women of Gilead." They were ripping up pregnant women in the Old Testament. So there's nothing new under the sun.
It's an interesting time. So I know here in Ohio, we have a heartbeat bill that went into effect the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned. But then immediately Planned Parenthood and other organizations filed a lawsuit. Thankfully, it was shot down in Ohio immediately as well. So our Supreme Court, they ruled no, that this is not. But what do we need to do? We need to be on guard, because people do have a tendency to think, "Oh, good, that's over, that's done with." No, there's still a battle. If anything, the battle has only been intensified for those on the left and those that are so adamant about abortion and so angry at motherhood and so angry at family and have these agendas. What do we need to do now in this hour, in this time, and what do we need to be mindful of? Because you're an attorney, you see what's going on.
I mean, for one thing, this is, it's an election year. It's an election season. And they've been saying that abortion's on the ballot. And I mean, we should be saying the same thing. Yeah, child sacrifice is on the ballot. And, he calls heaven and earth as witnesses that he sets before us this day, blessings and curses, life or death, blessings and curses. We need to choose life so that you and your children may live. We need to vote pro-life. We need to be encouraging others to vote pro-life. We need to make sure all of our friends and family know who to vote for at every level, including for judges. I don't know, in Michigan, Right to Life Michigan endorses judges, and we get to vote all the way up to the Supreme Court. We have 2 justices who are up for re-election right now. One is liberal, one's conservative. And sadly, they have a 1-vote majority right now. For years, we had a conservative Michigan Supreme Court. And that's going to make the difference. We also have abortion on the ballot. Literally, it looks like they're going to have enough signatures to try to amend the Michigan Constitution to create a right to an abortion. So it's
a battle. We have to stay in there and fight with our spiritual weapons in prayer, but we also have to do something, and we have to vote, and we have to be knowledgeable. Who is it? It's just for the folks that are part of Michigan. Do you know the name of the person that they need to support?
You need to go to rtl.org.
RTL.org?
Right to Life, RTL.org, and that's for Right to Life in Michigan.
And that tells us where those judges are.
Yeah, and there's a ballot generator. You put in your zip code, and they'll generate a ballot for you. It tells you at every level.
Wonderful. That's a great resource. Okay, because a lot of believers are saying, tell me what to do. I know the problem, but what? So rtl.org, they can find out, they can go in there and find out who their people are up on the ballots this year and who are right to life and who are not. Now, I understand, Rebecca, that you also impacted Governor Rick Perry in Texas and Newt Gingrich in their thinking and their ideology. Tell me about that.
So I'm in the Gift of Life film with Governor Mike Huckabee. It's a Citizens United film, and mine was one of several stories featured in the film. So I had backstage passes to the premiere in glamorous Des Moines, Iowa, because it was held in between a couple of presidential debates during the Iowa caucuses. So 4 presidential candidates spoke. Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, former U.S. Senator Rick Santorum, Newt Gingrich, and then Governor of Texas, Rick Perry. So I went backstage. I introduced myself to each of them, gave them my DVD. Bachmann and Santorum right away said, oh, I told them I'm the national spokesman for personhood. And they said, oh, I signed the personhood pledge. And I said, yes, I know. Thank you so much. It came out 2 days before. It was a presidential pledge, no exceptions, no compromise. But Perry and Gingrich had not signed it because they were both avowed to be rape exception candidates. And right away, Governor Perry was stunned. And he's holding the DVDs and he said, this is your story? And I shared with him how I was conceived and almost aborted. And he said, can I have your autograph?
Wow.
And I said, no. And he said, no, I mean it. Make it out to my daughter. Hands me a marker. So I wrote 100% pro-life, Drenda Keesee. Then he asked me more questions, and I told him some of the work that I do. I have a global network of now over 1,100 who were conceived in rape, mothers who became pregnant by rape, incest or sex trafficking, post-abortive from rape, and hundreds who were told by doctors to abort. And he said, you're my heroine.
Wow.
Like, wow. And I told him too the legal work I had done, defending human life and protecting rape victims and their children from the rapists having parental rights. Anyhow, I said, wow, thank you so much. But it's funny you say that, because my question for you is, would you be my hero?
Wow.
And he said, yes, I would. You make that rape exception. And he put his head down and he was shaking his head saying, wow, this is so powerful. This is so powerful.
Wow.
And he was thinking about it. And I explained that when you make that rape exception, that's like saying to me that I deserved the death penalty for the crime of my biological father. The U.S. Supreme Court said that he didn't even deserve the death penalty. Coker v. Georgia, no death penalty for rapists. Kennedy v. Louisiana, they said that even for child molesters, it's cruel and unusual punishment. And he was nodding his head. And then I asked him, but you believe that I, the innocent child, deserved the death penalty? And he said, no, I don't.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, and he stopped me and he said, tonight's event and this film are supposed to be all about changing hearts and minds. And right now you're changing my heart. And I thought, changing? Like, what's that supposed to mean? And I had friends on Facebook telling me they were praying for me, saying, you're going to have an Esther moment. I just know it for such a time as this.
That's
and
right.
I was not about to miss it. So I boldly challenged him, no more rape exceptions. And he looked me in the eyes. He promised no more rape exceptions.
Wow.
And he just went on to say that he had never put a face to the issue before. He
That's
had
good.
never considered it from someone like me.
That's good.
And he signed the personhood pledge the next morning, and so did Newt Gingrich.
That's
and
wonderful.
He went on national news over and over again, repeatedly being asked about this, like, what is this? You're a rape exception guy. You signed this personhood pledge. And he shared our conversation saying that my story pierced his heart and he could not look me in the eyes and justify the rape conception.
Wow, that's beautiful. He put a face with it. I mean, you're beautiful, you're talented, you're an attorney, you're fighting for families, you raise children of your own. God had a plan and has a plan for your life, and He has a plan for every person. Jeremiah says, I knew you before you were formed in your mother's womb. So God knows us, and He places a spirit in that baby, and that baby is not just a blob of flesh. I know when I was in school and they were really pushing abortion, it was the women's lib movement, and everything was about population control because we were going to run out of space and run out of resources, which was a big lie. If you fly in an airplane and you look out, you see far more land that's still undeveloped than you'll ever see where there's towns and cities and houses. There's still plenty of resources in the earth, but they've spun this lie about climate change, and they've spun this lie about not enough resources, and they do this population control thing and push abortion and killing babies. Satan's behind it. When we start talking about, well, what in the case of incest? What in the case of rape? And I understand that's less than 3%. Is that correct?
You know what? They'll say, you'll always hear people in the pro-life movement for 5 decades, they've said it's only 1%. But when they say, like, you save the 99 in exchange for the 1, like, I'll give you the 1, and they allow rape exceptions in legislation, and they endorse rape exception candidates. In Michigan, we've never had a rape exception in a single law, but in Congress, it's terrible. They always have rape exceptions. And they'll say that you save the 99 in exchange for the 1, the burning building. Whenever I hear the 99 and the 1, I can't help but think of the parable of the lost sheep.
That's exactly what I was thinking too, Rebecca.
And that's where the name of my organization comes from, Save the One. And in context, Jesus was talking about letting the little ones come to him. And he said, see that you do not despise any of these little ones. Mm-hmm. So what a strange thing to say. Who would despise a little one? Well, my people group, we're called demon seed, evil seed, horrible reminder, rapist child. They never call us rape victim's child.
Wow.
If you hear somebody say rapist child, you correct them, rape victim's child, and a child of God. And then they'll systematically target us for killing. We're called Satan's spawn. I mean, just all these horrible things. And then he says, for I tell you, their angels in heaven always look upon the face of my Father in heaven. And he goes right into, in the same paragraph, the parable of the lost sheep, how the good shepherd leaves the 99 to
and goes
take
after
one.
That one, yes.
And he finishes the parable by explaining its point. He says, for in the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish.
Amen.
And neither should we. And
That's
when you say, oh, it's only 1%, you're engaging in child sacrifice, saying, I'll give you the 1. That's child sacrifice.
Right. But for so long, the abortionists have used the rape thing to actually drive all abortion, right? But all children are important. All are made in the image and likeness of God. All have a spirit. Whether that child was conceived as a result of a rape, whether that child was conceived because they didn't use birth control, or whatever the reason doesn't change that this is a human being and a life, right?
Right. And, in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy, it says that you are not to punish the child for the sins of the father.
Oh, that's a good thought.
And in a civilized society, you do not punish innocent people for someone else's crime. That's is barbaric.
It is.
And I don't get that when they say, like, that, oh, what about cases of rape? I'm just curious if any of them in the Me Too day and age would advocate for a law that would allow rape victims to just say rape, and they would be authorized to hire a hitman to pay someone to kill their rapist. I mean, that's what abortion is. You're hired. They're paid assassins.
Right.
You're paying someone to have someone killed.
Yes. And someone that's completely innocent, that had nothing to do with the rape.
Right. But can you imagine the outrage if someone suggested such a law that no due process whatsoever, no police report, no investigation, no right to trial, just a woman says rape and she's allowed to pay someone to kill her rapist? And I asked them, would you support something like that, or just her innocent child? Because that's what it is. That's what you're proposing.
And we have a line of people wanting to adopt children, women that can't have babies, and families. There is a desire for those children, a place for those children. God has a plan for their life. I've talked to so many men and women of God who were actually in your situation. Their mother was planning to abort them. And yet today they're preachers, ministers, and have had huge impact. One of them is James Robinson. And so there's a whole plan of God for every child, and there's a whole bunch of people who've done amazing things. All these 64 million babies, depending on whose numbers you're looking at, that have been killed. Those were human beings that God created with life in them, that had a spirit in them, that could have been the answer to someone's cancer. Someone, could have been the cure, could have been the daughter when their mother's 84 years old, just like you. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for what you've stood for and for your fight to help families. And you had a closing thought. I think I see a closing thought there.
Well, it's sad that it's going to be left to the states, because to me it's like slavery. If it's wrong, it's wrong anywhere. Whether slave states or free states, and you're going to allow still abortion in other states. But it'll end up being a really tragic but interesting social experiment. Because in half the states, you are now going to have a generation of children who will be born, and their mothers who will be thankful that they were spared from the horror of abortion, like my birth mother is.
Right.
And the left will not want to hear their voices.
You're absolutely right. It's almost like God's saying, choose this day who you'll serve, because there'll be those liberal states that'll demand the right to kill babies and push and fight and kick and scream, and who knows what else they'll try to do with the federal lands and all of that. And then there'll be these states that stand up and say, here's the life, we protected these children and these human beings, and here's what their life has become and who they are. And you're right, people will be able to see the difference between God's ways and Satan's lies. And so it is a social experiment. You're right, though, I wish there was the protection for the human being, that child in the mother's womb. I'm thankful for Roe v. Wade being overturned, but it isn't the end, is it?
No, but you will see like the fruit that will be born, and literally these children, and then you're going to see barren devastation in these other states.
Yeah. Well, we need to pray. Thank you so much for joining me and for being a part of just sharing your story and being courageous. Thank you for, I'm thankful that your mother did give you life, even if it was the law that protected it. I'm so thankful that you're speaking up and that you've been a voice to impact Congress and Senate and law and legislation. And thank you for what you're doing in your family practice. So how can folks get in touch with you if they'd like to talk more? And you said we need to go to rtl.org to find out who we need to vote for in this fall's election, who is going to stand up for life in our states.
That's for Michigan. So you have Cleveland Right to Life does endorsements. They have a Personhood Ohio.
Good to know. In every state, there's somebody there. But if they reach out to you also, they can find out more information, right?
Yeah, and mine is RebeccaKiessling.com. My organization is SaveTheOne.com.
Right. Very good. SaveTheOne.com. That's beautiful. And you're the one. Jesus was willing to go and reach out and take you, because that's God's heart. He's always willing. It's people that make the decision to kill. And Satan is behind the killing, the stealing, and the destroying, right? Well, thanks for joining us today. And I want to encourage you that we need to still fight this fight. We need to make our voices known. The enemy's not going to back up and be quiet. Lust is never satisfied. Satan is never going to say, oh, yeah, okay, I lost this battle. No, people who are influenced by him, who have that bent toward the enemy's lies and have been deceived themselves, they're not going to quit fighting, and you and I cannot either. We've got to keep praying, stand up in your state, because what we need to do is make it so many voices and voting in our states that it drives this out of every single state. And children like Rebecca have a right to be able to live their life, to be able to flourish, and children can grow up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. So Anyway, I want to encourage you today, stand strong. This is Drenda. I'm Drenda, and you got to stay on guard. We'll see you next time. There are a lot of Christians who would tell you, a lot of leaders, a lot of pastors that would tell you, don't talk about certain things. In many ways, the church at large has been outwitted by Satan. We don't want to be silent about these things. We want to speak up. It takes courage. It takes boldness. But if we don't address and expose the deeds of darkness, then they take over. We must counter it. We must know our enemy. We must know our adversary, and we must know what his tactics are. We cannot be complacent anymore. You have influence. God has placed you in a sphere of influence. You are a soldier of the light. We need to be straightforward with the truth. Help us to be strong, God. Help us to do our part, Father, to be disciplined, to be ready, to be soldiers of light, soldiers of truth. God, help us to be on guard.